In our conversations, you have a couple of times brought us to the question of how just the ubiquity of social media experience is creating more exposure to anxiety for our adolescents. And there's only so much that a youth minister can do to control the assaults that are unhealthy behaviors that are being unleashed on social media. But the youth minister does have a community of young people in their care. How can the youth minister change the way they behave or nudge them or get them to think about how they behave online? And then how can the youth minister give them some buffers or protections when they're on the receiving end of online unkindness or anxiety-producing communications?
My older daughter started middle school this year. She's just finished the 6th grade in Austin, Texas. And early in the school year, I noticed that there were 2 words that were listed on the school sign out front that gets changed for different things, but it stayed there for many, many months. In fact, it still may be there. And it said, "Be kind." And I took a picture of it and I showed it to my wife, and I've shown it to friends. And I thought, what if we promoted a culture in schools, in the church, in the broader society of what I would call competitive kindness, or an iteration of that, competitive compassion, something that would serve maybe as an antidote to some of the mean-spiritedness or the cyberbullying kinds of things that we've talked about. And I think particularly at that developmental stage, being reminded that kindness is an ideal, a norm perhaps, one that we can seek after and should seek after, its close companion, compassion. I think those could go a long way with trying to help offset some of the other more destructive kinds of phenomena we see in the school experience, in the church experience, and certainly on social media. So I think focusing on virtues like kindness and compassion and caring, making those the ideal as opposed to the more destructive values that seem to be perpetuated is a good place to start.
Yeah, I listened to an NPR interview recently that connected someone who'd been cyberbullied with their bullier some years later, and it talked about the growth that it was a brief clip, but it had both persons' voices. And I wonder if just sharing something like that wouldn't be helpful in the context of a youth group to show that kind of, because I think there's also a bystander phenomenon.
Yeah,
a lot of kids witness what goes on, and they feel a kind of moral injury, but they don't know how to respond. And they also might be entertained, quite honestly, by it all, which is that kind of impolite entertainment that's so prominent in our kind of reality television culture right now. But I think kids are really able to do moral reflection on these themes. And I think slowing time down and just showing an example of someone who was on the bullying end, someone who was the bullier, and how they changed, and how there was some self-awareness, because that just comes up as a helpful example. I think it's also helpful to talk about the different kind of, well, for one thing, you have to intervene and protect someone who's being bullied if you find out that that's happening and you need to stop the behavior. But then I think we also have to have a conversation about being a bystander and the fear of missing out and being linked into these networks that amplify things rather than kind of address them in a more healing or holistic fashion.